The stars had always been cold and distant to Elena Vasquez. Now standing in the massive chamber aboard the Zephyrian mothership, she felt smaller than she ever had in her life. The ceiling stretched so high that Earth's biggest cathedral would fit inside with room to spare. Beings from across the galaxy filled the space, each one representing species that had mastered the stars while humans were still fighting with sticks and stones. Elena adjusted her simple black suit and tried not to stare. To her left, a creature made entirely of living crystal hummed in frequencies that made her teeth ache. To her right, something that looked like a walking tree discussed trade routes with a being that seemed to be made of pure energy, contained in a metal shell. She was the only human in a room of gods. Ambassador Vasquez of Terra. A voice called out, speaking perfect English through a translation device. Elena turned to see High Arbiter Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire approaching. The Zephyrian stood nearly 8 feet tall, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within, and 4 arms that moved with fluid grace. Their eyes were the color of deep space, filled with stars that actually twinkled. "High Arbiter," Elena said, offering a small bow. She had practiced this greeting 100 times during the 3-month journey to reach the Galactic Confederation's central hub. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Veltar's expression was hard to read, but there seemed to be something like kindness in those star-filled eyes. "Your species interests us, young Elena. Tell me, how many humans live on your world?" 12 billion, sir. Maybe a little more. Elena felt proud of that number. Earth was crowded, but it was home to so many lives, so many dreams. 12 billion, Veltar repeated slowly. Around them, other delegates had begun to listen. Elena heard what sounded like laughter from the crystal being. "And your technology level?" Elena's cheeks burned. "We achieved faster-than-light travel 6 months ago. Our first successful jump brought us into contact with your border patrol." More sounds that might have been laughter. A voice from somewhere in the crowd called out in accented English, "Babies playing with fire." "Quiet," Veltar said, and the room fell silent immediately. The High Arbiter clearly commanded respect here. "Continue, Ambassador." Elena straightened her shoulders. "We know we're new to this. We know we have a lot to learn, but we want to be part of the galactic community. We want to contribute. Contribute what?" This came from a snake-like being with too many eyes. "Your species has nothing we need. No resources we cannot find elsewhere. No technology we lack. No knowledge we desire." "Perhaps," Veltar said quietly, "they have something else to offer." Before anyone could ask what that meant, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The lights shifted from warm white to harsh red, and a voice spoke in the common galactic language. Elena's translation device struggled to keep up. "Solar event detected. Class X solar storm approaching Terra system. Estimated time to impact, 14 standard hours. Magnetic field collapse probability, 97%. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "What does that mean?" Veltar's forearms moved in what might have been distress. "Your star is releasing a burst of energy that will strip away your planet's protective magnetic field. Without it, your atmosphere will be blown away into space. All life on Terra will die within days." The room had gone completely quiet. Elena could hear her own heartbeat. Can anything be done?" "Theoretically," said the snake-like delegate, "but the cost would be enormous. Solar manipulation technology exists, but it requires massive energy expenditure. The economic cost would be equivalent to purchasing several star systems. No one would spend that much to save a primitive world," another voice added. "Especially not for a species that offers nothing in return." Elena looked around the room desperately. These beings could save her world, save 12 billion people, but to them it was just a matter of economics. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "There has to be something we can do. Some way to pay you back." "With what?" The crystal being chimed. "Your species has achieved basic FTL travel and little else. You have no wealth, no technology, no resources of value. We have ourselves," Elena said firmly. "Humans work hard. We learn fast. We don't give up. If someone saves our world, we'll spend the rest of our existence paying them back." More laughter rippled through the crowd. "Pretty words," someone said. "But words don't power solar manipulation arrays." Veltar had been silent through this exchange, those star-filled eyes studying Elena carefully. Finally, the High Arbiter spoke. "The Zephyrian Empire will undertake this task." The room exploded into surprised chatter. Elena felt her knees go weak with relief and shock. High Arbiter, the snake-like delegate said. Surely you cannot be serious. The cost will be recorded as a debt, Veltar said calmly. 1 world preserved, 12 billion lives saved. Payment to be determined when humanity achieves the capacity to repay. Elena wanted to cry, to laugh, to fall to her knees in gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. We won't forget this. I promise you we will never forget. See that you don't, Veltar said. Then louder, prepare the solar manipulation fleet. We have work to do. The next 14 hours passed like a dream. Elena watched from the observation deck as Zephyrian ships arranged themselves around Earth's sun. The vessels were beautiful, like silver flowers that bloomed in the darkness of space. They worked with precision that took her breath away, redirecting the solar storm's energy, strengthening Earth's magnetic field, turning a planet-killing event into nothing more than pretty lights in the sky. When it was over, Veltar found Elena still watching through the viewport. Your world is safe, the High Arbiter said. Your people will live. How much? Elena asked quietly. How much do we owe you? Veltar was quiet for a long moment. By current galactic exchange rates, approximately 400 billion standard credits. Elena did the math in her head. Earth's entire economic output for a year was maybe 50 billion credits. It will take us a very long time to pay that back. Perhaps a century or more, Veltar agreed. Your species will be classified as debtors until the obligation is fulfilled. This will limit your access to certain technologies, certain trade routes, certain opportunities. Elena nodded. She understood. They would be second-class citizens in the galaxy until they could pay their debt. We understand, and we're grateful anyway. I believe you are, Veltar said. Tell me, Elena Vasquez of Terra, what will you do now? Elena looked out at the stars, no longer cold and distant but filled with possibility. We'll work. We'll learn. We'll grow stronger, and someday we'll pay you back. And if that day never comes? Elena met those star-filled eyes steadily. Then our children will pay you back. Or their children. However long it takes. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, word of the massive debt spread throughout the galactic community. Most species laughed. The humans had been given charity they could never repay. They were indentured to the Zephyrians for generations to come, but a few, like Veltar, wondered if there might be more to humanity than met the eye. The High Arbiter had seen something in Elena's eyes when she made her promise, something that suggested this young species might surprise them all. Time, as always in galactic affairs, would tell. 114 years had passed since the day Zephyrian ships saved Earth from the solar storm. Elena Vasquez was long dead, but her great-granddaughter, Maria Santos, carried the same determined fire in her eyes as she supervised the loading of medical supplies onto a transport ship. The human settlement on Kepler Station buzzed with activity. What had started as a small mining outpost had grown into a thriving community of 50,000 humans. They worked the asteroid belts that other species found too dangerous, dove into gas-giant atmospheres to harvest rare elements, and took on construction jobs in the vacuum of space that made other races nervous. Captain Santos called out Dr. Jin Wu, the station's chief medical officer. The Altarian delegation is here. Maria turned to see 3 tall, blue-skinned beings walking across the dock. The Altarians moved with the careful grace of people who spent most of their time in low gravity. Their leader, Ambassador Thren, had worked with humans before. Captain Santos, Thren said in accented English, we received your message about the medical supplies. 2 tons of synthesized antibiotics and antiviral compounds, Maria confirmed. Our biolabs have been working around the clock to produce them. Thren's large eyes showed surprise. You developed these yourselves? We were told humans lacked advanced medical technology. Maria smiled. We learn fast. When the crystalline miners got sick with that plague last year, we studied the samples they brought us. Took us 6 months, but we figured out how to make medicine that works. The Crystalline Collective still speaks of that, Thren admitted. Your people worked without rest to help them, expecting nothing in return. They needed help, Maria said simply. That's enough. This was the way of things now. Humans had carved out their niche in the galaxy, not through advanced technology or superior strength, but through sheer determination and willingness to help others. When the Vorthon homeworld faced ecological collapse, human engineers worked for 3 years to design atmospheric processors that could clean their air. When pirates attacked trade routes near the spiral arm, human security forces volunteered to patrol the shipping lanes. Each act of service, each solved problem, each life saved was carefully recorded in the Debt Remembrance Council's archives back on Earth. Every human child learned the story of the Zephyrian rescue. Every human adult could recite exactly how much they still owed, down to the last credit. The debt had grown, of course. Interest accumulated year after year. What had started as 400 billion credits had swollen to over 600 billion. At humanity's current rate of payment, they would need another 2 centuries to clear it. Some humans had suggested they ask for debt forgiveness. The galactic community would probably grant it, especially given how useful humans had proven to be. But the suggestion was always voted down overwhelmingly. They had made a promise. They would keep it. Maria was thinking about this as she walked through the station's main corridor. The walls were covered with images and stories from across human space. Photos of the medical center on Vega Prime, where human doctors treated patients from 17 different species. News reports about the human rescue team that had saved 200 beings from a space station collision in the Andromeda sector. A memorial to the 43 humans who had died fighting fires on the gas refineries of Titan 9. Captain. The voice belonged to Commander Sarah Park, Maria's second-in-command. We just got word from Earth. Priority message from the Council. Maria frowned. Priority messages were rare. What's the situation? Sarah handed her a datapad. There's been an attack on the Zephyrian border. Something called the Void Swarm. Early reports suggest it's unlike anything the galaxy has seen before. Maria read quickly, her frown deepening with each line. The reports were fragmentary but frightening. Entire star systems going dark. Fleets of ships that seemed to consume matter and convert it into more ships. A spreading plague of mechanical destruction that left nothing behind. How bad is it? Maria asked. Bad enough that the Galactic Council has called an emergency session. Representatives from every major species are gathering at the central hub. Maria thought of her great-great-grandmother Elena, standing in that same chamber over a century ago. We need to send someone. Already done. Ambassador Chen left this morning. But Captain, Sarah hesitated. There's something else. The Zephyrians have suffered heavy losses. Their border fleets are gone. Some of their outer colonies have been completely destroyed. Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. The Zephyrians had saved humanity. They were more than creditors. They were the reason 12 billion people were still alive. How can we help? I don't know, Sarah said honestly. But I know we have to try. 3 days later, the emergency session convened. Ambassador Chen, a small woman with silver hair and Elena Vasquez's steady gaze, stood before the assembled delegates. The chamber was different now than it had been in Elena's time. Humans had earned their place here through years of service and sacrifice. They were no longer the primitive newcomers asking for charity. High Arbiter Veltar looked older than before, though it was hard to tell with Zephyrians. The star-filled eyes seemed dimmer, and 2 of the forearms showed signs of recent injury. The situation is grave, Veltar was saying. The Void Swarm appears to be a self-replicating mechanical intelligence. It consumes raw matter to build more units. It has already destroyed 17 star systems in our territory. What about evacuation? Asked the Altarian representative. We are attempting to evacuate our civilian populations, but the swarm moves faster than our transport capacity allows. We estimate that without immediate assistance, the Zephyrian Empire will fall within 6 months. The chamber erupted in worried chatter. The Zephyrians were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. If they could fall to this threat, what hope did anyone else have? What kind of assistance do you need? Shen asked clearly. Veltar's gaze found her across the chamber. Military support would be appreciated, but we understand that most species cannot risk their own fleets against an enemy that grows stronger with each victory. We are prepared to offer significant trade concessions and debt forgiveness to any who can help evacuate our civilians. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Debt forgiveness. The very thing many humans had wanted for over a century. The Zephyrians were offering to wipe clean humanity's obligation in exchange for help during their darkest hour. Ambassador Chen called out the snake-like delegate who had mocked humanity so long ago. Your species owes the Zephyrians a considerable debt. This would be an excellent opportunity to clear that obligation while providing minimal assistance. Chen looked around the chamber. She could see the calculation in dozens of alien eyes, Help with evacuation, get debt forgiveness, minimal risk. It was a good deal. I will need to consult with my government, Chen said diplomatically. But she already knew what the answer would be. She had grown up hearing the stories of Elena Vasquez and the promise humanity had made. She knew the human spirit well enough to predict their response. The message came back from Earth within hours, transmitted simultaneously to every human colony, every human ship, every human outpost in the galaxy. The response was unanimous, from the factories of Mars to the mining platforms of the Kuiper Belt, from the research stations orbiting distant pulsars to the diplomatic corps on alien worlds. Debt forgiveness was rejected. Payment was due, and humanity always paid its debts. But more than that, the Zephyrians had saved Earth when they could have chosen to let it die. They had shown kindness to a species that had nothing to offer in return. They had trusted humanity with a debt that many thought could never be repaid. Now the Zephyrians needed help, and humanity remembered. The mobilization began immediately. The Void Swarm moved through space like a cancer, consuming everything in its path. Admiral Kess watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship Starfire, her forearms moving across control surfaces as she coordinated what remained of her fleet. 3 months had passed since the emergency session at the Galactic Hub. In that time, the swarm had consumed 29 star systems. Entire worlds had been stripped down to their component atoms and rebuilt into more swarm units. The mechanical plague grew stronger with each victory, and now it surrounded the Zephyrian home system like a tightening noose. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we're receiving evacuation reports from the outer colonies. Transport efficiency is at 37%. Cass felt her heart sink. 37% meant that nearly 2/3 of Zephyrian civilians in the outer system would not escape before the swarm arrived. Millions would die, converted into raw materials for the enemy's endless hunger. Any word from the Galactic Council? She asked. The Altarians have agreed to accept 50,000 refugees. The Crystalline Collective will take 20,000. The Vorthans, the officer paused. The Vorthans send their regrets but say they cannot risk swarm infiltration. Kess nodded grimly. She understood their fear. The swarm was unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. It didn't negotiate, didn't seek territory or resources in any way they could understand. It simply consumed and grew, an endless mechanical appetite that turned living worlds into sterile factories. Contact High Arbiter Veltar, Kess ordered. Tell him we may need to consider the final evacuation protocol. The final evacuation protocol meant abandoning the home system entirely. It meant the end of the Zephyrian Empire as they had known it for 10,000 years. Admiral, the sensor operator's voice was sharp with surprise. I'm detecting new ships entering the system. Lots of them. Kess moved to the sensor station, her star-filled eyes studying the readings. Unknown configuration. Are they swarm units? No, ma'am. These appear to be human vessels. Kess blinked in surprise. Human ships were not uncommon in Zephyrian space, but usually only small merchant vessels or transport craft. The sensor readings showed something very different. How many ships? She asked. The sensor operator checked his readings twice before answering. Approximately 3,000 vessels, Admiral. They range from small fighters to ships the size of battle cruisers. Kess stared at the display. 3,000 ships represented the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. It was larger than many species' entire navies. Open communications with the lead vessel, she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human warship. A woman in a dark blue uniform looked back at them, her face determined and familiar in a way that made Kess's memory stir. This is Captain Maria Santos of the human vessel Promise Keeper, the woman said. We request permission to enter Zephyrian space. Captain Santos, Kess said. I am Admiral Kess. Permission granted. But I must warn you that this system is under siege by the Void Swarm. It is not safe for civilian vessels. Maria's expression didn't change. With respect, Admiral, we didn't come here as civilians. You came to help with the evacuation? We appreciate the gesture, but your transport capacity won't significantly impact. No, ma'am, Maria interrupted. We came to fight. Kess felt a chill run through her. Captain, you don't understand. The Void Swarm has destroyed fleets 10 times the size of yours. Your ships, while admirable, are not equipped for this level of warfare. Maybe not, Maria admitted, but we're here anyway. Before Kess could respond, her tactical officer called out, Admiral, the human fleet is moving into combat formation. They're positioning themselves between us and the outer swarm forces. Kess watched in amazement as the human ships spread out in a complex pattern. Their vessels were indeed smaller and less advanced than Zephyrian warships, but they moved with precision and purpose. Captain Santos, Kess said, your fleet will be destroyed. The swarm's conversion technology will turn your ships into more enemy units. You'll be making the situation worse. Maria smiled, and in that expression Kess saw something that reminded her of old recordings of Elena Vasquez. Admiral, 114 years ago your people saved my world. 12 billion humans are alive today because the Zephyrian Empire chose to help strangers who had nothing to offer in return. The debt, Kess began, isn't why we're here, Maria finished. We're here because you showed us kindness when we were nothing. We're here because that's what friends do for each other. On the tactical display, the first wave of swarm units was approaching. They moved in perfect formation. Thousands of dark ships that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each one was a fragment of consumed worlds, built from the atoms of dead civilizations. All human vessels. Maria's voice came over the communications channel. This is Promise Keeper. Remember why we're here. Remember what they did for us. Today we pay our debt. But more than that, today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. The response came back from 3,000 ships, 3,000 human voices speaking as one. Debt and honor. We remember. Kess watched as the human fleet accelerated toward the swarm. It should have been suicide. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. But something strange happened. The human ships didn't fight like any military force Kess had ever seen. They fought like people defending their families. When a human vessel was damaged, 2 others would move to protect it. When swarm units tried to surround a ship, the entire human fleet would shift to prevent it, and they were winning. Admiral, her tactical officer said in amazement, the humans have destroyed the first swarm wave. Casualties are minimal on their side. How is that possible? They're using tactics I've never seen before. Coordinated ramming attacks, close-range boarding actions, self-destruct sequences timed to maximum effect. They're fighting like what? Kess asked. Like they don't care if they die as long as they take the enemy with them. Kess understood. The humans weren't just fighting to repay a debt. They were fighting for something much more powerful. They were fighting out of gratitude, out of love, out of a determination that had been passed down through 4 generations. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command, Kess ordered. I need to speak with whoever is in charge of this operation. The connection took several minutes to establish, but eventually an elderly human appeared on screen. He wore the simple uniform of the Debt Remembrance Council, and his eyes held the same fire that Kess had seen in Elena Vasquez so long ago. Admiral Kess, the man said. I am Director Kim Santos, Maria's grandfather. I speak for all of humanity when I say that we are honored to fight alongside the Zephyrian Empire. Director Santos, your people are taking enormous risks for us. The galactic community offered you debt forgiveness in exchange for simple evacuation assistance. Why reject that offer? Director Santos was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of over a century of human determination. Admiral, when your people saved Earth, High Arbiter Veltar could have demanded immediate payment. Your people could have let us die and saved themselves the expense. Instead, you trusted us to repay our debt when we were able. That trust was based on hope, not certainty, Kess said. Exactly. You had hope in a species you barely knew. You believed we would honor our word even when we had no way to prove it. That kind of faith. Admiral, that's not something you can put a price on. On the tactical display, the human fleet was engaging the second swarm wave. More human ships were taking damage now, but they continued to fight with the same desperate courage. Your people are dying for us, Kess said quietly. Yes, Director Santos agreed. And they're doing it gladly. Because this isn't about money or politics or galactic standing. This is about showing that some debts are too important to ever be forgotten. As Kess watched the battle unfold, she began to understand something that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity hadn't come to repay a debt. They had come to honor a friendship that transcended any economic obligation. And in doing so, they were about to turn the tide against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Captain Maria Santos gripped her command chair as the Promise Keeper shuddered under enemy fire. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, despite the chaos of battle raging outside. Through the main screen, she could see swarm vessels closing in on the human fleet from all directions. "Damage report," she called out. "Hull breach on Deck 7. But it's sealed," her chief engineer reported. "Shields are down to 40%. The quantum virus deployment system is still operational." Maria nodded. The quantum virus was humanity's secret weapon, developed in hidden laboratories across human space over the past 3 months. It was designed to attack the swarm's hive-mind connection, turning their greatest strength against them. But deploying it required someone to get close to the swarm's central nexus, a massive structure at the heart of their formation. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. "Captain," her communications officer said, "Admiral Kess is requesting an update on our status." "Tell her we're proceeding with the plan," Maria replied. She switched to the fleet-wide channel. "All human vessels, this is Promise Keeper. Operation Debt Payment is now active. Remember, we don't need to destroy them all. We just need to get close enough to upload the virus." The response came back from 3,000 ships. "Understood, Captain. Debt and honor." Maria had grown up hearing stories about her great-great-grandmother Elena and the promise she had made to the Zephyrians. Every human child learned about the day their world was saved by the kindness of strangers. But Maria had never expected to be the one to fulfill that ancient obligation. "Captain," her tactical officer said, "we're detecting a massive swarm formation moving toward the Zephyrian homeworld. At least 50,000 units." Maria felt her stomach tighten. 50,000 swarm vessels could strip a planet bare in hours. The Zephyrian evacuation was only half complete. Millions of civilians would die if that force reached the surface. "All ships, new priority target," she announced. "We're going to intercept that formation. We cannot let them reach the home world." "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "that's 10 times our numbers. We won't survive that kind of engagement." "I know," Maria said, "but we don't need to survive. We just need to buy time." The human fleet changed course, accelerating toward the massive swarm formation. As they closed the distance, Maria opened a private channel to her grandfather back on Earth. "Grandpa," she said, "I want you to know that every human out here is proud to be keeping Elena's promise." Director Santos's weathered face appeared on her screen. Behind him, she could see the main chamber of the Debt Remembrance Council, where humanity's obligation to the Zephyrians was recorded in letters of gold. "Maria," he said, "your great-great-grandmother would be proud. You all would. The virus will work, won't it? Our scientists believe so. The swarm's hive mind depends on quantum entanglement between units. Disrupt that connection and they should become just individual machines without central coordination." Maria nodded. "And all it takes is one ship getting close enough to their nexus to upload it." "One ship," Director Santos confirmed. "But Maria, you don't have to be the one—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "This is what captains are for, Grandpa. To make the hard choices so others don't have to." The battle began as they entered the swarm formation. Human ships fought with desperate courage, using ramming attacks and close-range weapons to punch through swarm defenses. They had learned from previous engagements that the swarm vessels were vulnerable to unexpected tactics, to the kind of creative thinking that only came from biological minds. "Captain," her helmsman reported, "I can see the nexus. It's that massive structure at the center of their formation." Maria looked at the main screen. The nexus was enormous, easily the size of a space station. It pulsed with dark energy, coordinating the movements of thousands of swarm units. Getting close to it would mean flying through the heart of enemy territory. "All ships," Maria announced. "This is Promise Keeper. We're beginning our final approach. It has been an honor to serve with all of you." The human fleet formed up around the Promise Keeper, creating a protective corridor through the swarm forces. Ships exploded around them as enemy fire concentrated on the formation, but the humans pressed forward. "Promise Keeper, this is Admiral Kess," came a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship. "Your fleet has already done more than enough. You don't have to sacrifice yourselves for us." "Admiral," Maria replied, "with respect, yes we do. 114 years ago, your people could have let Earth die. Instead, you saved 12 billion strangers because it was the right thing to do. Today we return that kindness." "Captain Santos," Kess said, and Maria could hear the emotion in the Admiral's voice. "The debt you speak of, it was forgiven long ago by your actions. You have saved more lives than we ever saved of yours. Maybe, Maria said. But this isn't about keeping score anymore. This is about showing the galaxy that some bonds can't be broken by time or distance or death. The Promise Keeper broke through the final line of swarm defenders. Her hull scarred by weapons fire, but her quantum virus deployment system still intact. Ahead lay the Nexus, its dark surface crawling with defensive turrets. All stop, Maria ordered. Prepare for manual virus insertion. Her crew stared at her. Captain, her first officer said, the deployment system can launch the virus from here. You don't need to. The system might not work, Maria said. Too much damage, too much interference. But if someone carries it manually to the Nexus surface, we can guarantee deployment. She was already moving toward the airlock, pulling on a spacesuit. Continue the attack pattern. Keep their attention on the ship. I'll handle the virus. Captain, no, her chief engineer protested. Let me go. You're needed here. Maria smiled at her crew, these brave people who had followed her into impossible odds. I'm needed there, she said, pointing at the Nexus. Take care of each other. And tell my family that I kept the promise. The airlock cycled and Maria launched herself into space. The quantum virus device was strapped to her back, its weight familiar from dozens of training sessions. Around her, the battle raged as human ships continued their desperate assault on the swarm forces. The journey to the Nexus took 11 minutes. Maria used her suit's thrusters to navigate between weapons fire and debris, keeping low to avoid detection. The Nexus surface was smooth and dark, like obsidian that absorbed all light. Finding an access port took another 3 minutes. Maria plugged the virus device directly into the Nexus's data stream, watching as human technology interfaced with alien mechanics. Upload commencing, the device announced in her helmet. Estimated time to completion 90 seconds. Swarm defenders had finally spotted her. Maria could see them converging on her position. Mechanical units designed for close combat in space. She drew her sidearm and opened fire, knowing it would buy her only moments. Come on, she whispered to the device. Work, please work, 60 seconds. The first swarm unit reached her, its cutting tools sparking against her suit's armor. Maria fired point blank into its processor core, watching it spiral away into space. 30 seconds. More units arrived, their weapons tearing into her suit. Maria felt the cold of space seeping in, but she held her position, protecting the virus device with her body. 15 seconds. Her weapon was empty, her suit failing. Maria could see more swarm units approaching, but she smiled inside her helmet. She had done it. She had kept the promise that Elena Vasquez made over a century ago. Upload complete, the device announced. The effect was immediate. Across the entire swarm formation, ships stopped moving in perfect coordination. Their hive-mind connection was severed, leaving thousands of individual units suddenly unable to communicate or coordinate their actions. Maria watched as the swarm began to tear itself apart, units firing on each other in confusion, their formation collapsing into chaos. In the distance, she could see human ships regrouping, taking advantage of the swarm's sudden disarray. Her suit's life support was failing, but Maria felt peace. She had done what needed to be done. The debt was paid, but more than that, she had honored the friendship between two species that had grown over more than a century. As consciousness faded, Maria thought she could hear her great-great-grandmother's voice, carried on the solar wind from a distant star. Well done, child. Well done. The battle of the Zephyrian home system was over. Humanity had won not through superior technology or numbers, but through the power of a promise kept and a debt paid in full. But the story was far from over. In saving the Zephyrians, humanity had done something that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The Great Hall of Records on the galactic capital world had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from 847 species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a symphony of languages that the translation systems struggled to process. At the center of it all stood High Arbiter Veltar, looking older but somehow more vital than before. 6 months had passed since the battle of the Zephyrian home system. The quantum virus that Captain Maria Santos had died to deploy had not only saved the Zephyrians, but had spread throughout the galaxy's data networks, systematically destroying every trace of the Void Swarm. 43 star systems had been liberated, their populations freed from mechanical slavery. Thousands of worlds had been saved from consumption. But today was not about celebrating victory. Today was about something that had never happened in the recorded history of galactic civilization. Director Kim Santos sat in the human delegation section, wearing the simple black uniform of the Debt Remembrance Council. Around him sat the survivors of the human fleet, men and women who had followed his granddaughter into battle and lived to tell the tale. Their faces were solemn, but their eyes held the same determined fire that had driven humanity for over a century. "The Galactic Council will now hear the matter of the Terran debt," announced the chamber speaker, a crystalline being whose voice rang like musical chimes. "High Arbiter Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire, you may present your case." Veltar rose from his seat, his forearms moving in formal gestures of respect. "Honored delegates," he began. 114 years ago, the Zephyrian Empire extended aid to a primitive species facing extinction. The cost was 400 billion standard credits, recorded as a debt to be repaid when humanity achieved the capacity to do so. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Most delegates knew the story, but hearing it spoken in formal session gave it new weight. Over the following century, Veltar continued, this debt grew to 637 billion credits with accumulated interest. Under normal galactic law, humanity would be obligated to continue payments until this sum was cleared. The snake-like delegate who had mocked humanity so long ago shifted in his seat. The Zephyrians are clearly within their rights to demand full payment. The humans took on this obligation willingly. Indeed, Veltar said. However, recent events have complicated this matter considerably. The main display activated, showing images from the recent battle. Human ships fighting impossible odds, the sacrifice of Maria Santos, the collapse of the Void Swarm as the quantum virus spread through their networks. In the past 6 months, Veltar said, humanity has saved not only the Zephyrian Empire, but 43 star systems containing over 2 trillion sentient beings. They have eliminated a threat that could have consumed the entire galaxy. The value of these actions cannot be calculated in mere credits. Director Santos rose slowly from his seat. High Arbiter, if I may address the council. You may speak, Director Santos. Kim Santos walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He looked older than his years, bearing the weight of a promise passed down through generations. Honored delegates, he said. My great-great-grandmother Elena Vasquez stood in this chamber over a century ago and made a promise on behalf of all humanity. She promised that we would repay our debt to the Zephyrian Empire, no matter how long it took. He paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. That promise was kept 6 months. Ago when my granddaughter Maria Santos gave her life to deploy the quantum virus that saved not just the Zephyrians but countless other species. The Altarian delegate leaned forward. Are you suggesting the debt is now cleared? No, Director Santos said firmly. I'm suggesting we have vastly overpaid. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. This was unprecedented in galactic law. Species did not overpay debts, especially not by such enormous margins. The original debt, Director Santos continued, was for 1 world saved. We have saved 43 worlds, protected 847 species, and eliminated a galactic threat that could have ended civilization as we know it. By any reasonable calculation, the Zephyrian Empire now owes humanity approximately 15 trillion standard credits. The chamber fell silent. 15 trillion credits was more than the gross domestic product of most galactic sectors. High Arbiter Veltar spoke into the silence. Director Santos speaks truthfully. Under galactic law, when a debt is overpaid to this degree, the creditor becomes the debtor. The Zephyrian Empire formally acknowledges that we now owe humanity an enormous sum. However, Director Santos said, humanity formally rejects any repayment. This caused even more commotion. The crystalline delegate's voice chimed with confusion. You reject payment? But why? Director Santos smiled, and in that expression, every delegate could see the same determination that had driven Elena Vasquez, Maria Santos, and generations of humans between them. Because, he said, when the Zephyrian Empire saved Earth, they didn't do it for profit. They did it because it was right. They showed kindness to strangers who had nothing to offer in return. They trusted us to honor our word even when they had no guarantee we would. He turned to face Veltar directly. High Arbiter, your people gave us something more valuable than the energy to save our world. You gave us an example of what it means to help others without expecting anything in return. You showed us that some things matter more than economics or politics or racial differences. The debt we owed you was never really about money. Director Santos continued. It was about proving that your faith in us was justified. It was about showing that kindness, once given, creates bonds that can never be broken. Veltar's star-filled eyes seemed to brighten. Then you consider the debt satisfied? No, Director Santos said. We consider it transformed. The debt between our species can never be repaid because it was never really a debt at all. It was the beginning of something much more important. He addressed the entire chamber now. Let this stand as a new principle in galactic law. When one species saves another out of pure kindness without expectation of reward, a bond is created that transcends any economic obligation. Such acts should not be forgotten or dismissed as simple charity. They should be remembered, honored, and passed down through generations as examples of what we can be at our best. The chamber speaker's crystalline form resonated with harmonic tones. The council recognizes the establishment of the human doctrine, that acts of preservation create bonds that transcend economics and cannot be quantified in mere credits. Years passed. The story of humanity's debt spread throughout the galaxy, told in schools and recorded in archives. Statues of Captain Maria Santos were erected on hundreds of worlds. The quantum virus became the standard defense against mechanical plagues. The Battle of the Zephyrian home system was studied in military academies across all inhabited space. But more than that, the human doctrine changed how species interacted with each other. Acts of kindness were no longer seen as weakness or naive charity. They were recognized as investments in the future, creating bonds that could unite civilizations across vast distances and differences. Children of countless species learned the story of how a young species called humanity received kindness from strangers and spent over a century, proving worthy of that trust. They learned that some debts were too precious to ever be fully repaid because they represented the best of what civilized beings could be. On Earth, in the hall of the Debt Remembrance Council, a new inscription was added beneath Elena Vasquez's original promise. It read, "A debt of kindness once acknowledged becomes a bond eternal." In honoring our obligation to the Zephyrian Empire, humanity has learned that the greatest treasures cannot be measured in credits but in the connections we forge with those who show us grace in our darkest hours. The galaxy never forgot the day humanity repaid its debt by overpaying so thoroughly that the very nature of debt itself was transformed. It became a legend told across the stars, proof that kindness once given echoes through the cosmos forever. And in the depths of space, where new species still took their first tentative steps toward the stars, the message was clear. Extend kindness to strangers, for you never know who might remember that grace for generations to come. The debt was paid, the bond was eternal, and the galaxy was forever changed.